Okay, next up we've got Brad van Leeuwen, the co-founder of Cledara, one of the world's biggest SaaS management platforms, and he's going to be talking to you about the real-time state of the market. So welcome to Brad.
So whether it's by coincidence or fate, Web Summit has marked every important inflection point in the global SaaS market since the pandemic. In 2021, November 2021 at Web Summit marked the market top of the NASDAQ, right? November 2022 marked the market bottom. The NASDAQ had fallen by 65%. Come to this time last year when I gave this presentation, I was talking about how after 2 long years of the SaaS winter, maybe there were signs of SaaS spring. Buyer budgets were still super tight. New logos were hard to come by for SaaS vendors, but yet SaaS vendors had found ways to grow. They'd found ways of increasing prices on customers just to eke out that growth and to keep going. Hi everyone, my name's Brad van Leeuwen. I'm the COO and co-founder of Cledara. And what I'm here to talk about today is to update that conversation from last year. What is the real-time state of the global software market today? The first thing to know is this presentation is based on a lot of data. Don't worry, there'll be a QR code at the end where you can download all these slides as well as the rest of our research, so please stick around. But this research is based on the SaaS buying behaviors of more than 1,000 companies across 32 countries, and by the end of the year, it'll be approaching 750,000 software subscriptions that are being managed on our platform. And what we've done is we've aggregated and anonymized all that data and combined it into this research for you today. But the question is, where does this data come from? And well, my marketing team has asked me to talk about what we do. So Cledara is one of the world's largest SaaS purchasing and management platforms. So if you're a founder or a CFO and you're not sure what you're spending on, why you're spending on it, and if you're still using it, and you feel like you need a little bit more visibility and control over your software, come check us out at cledara.com. But let's get to it. Again, QR code at the end so that you can check all this out. So I stood on this stage last year in 2023 and said that 2023 was the hardest year in recent history for selling software. And I'm afraid I've got to say it again. 2024 is without doubt one of the hardest years in recent history to sell software. So what this chart shows is it shows the proportion of company software budgets that are being allocated to new software purchases, right? So how much of the pie, if you're trying to sell into a new customer, how much of the pie are you fighting for? So in 2022, around 14 cents on the dollar was being allocated by software buyers and companies to new software. Today, so far in 2024, that number's fallen to less than 6 cents in the dollar. So if you're a software vendor, you're fighting for a really, really small part of that pie. The good news is, once you're in the door, you get to fight for the 94%, but that first part's really hard. And so companies have been really leaning into, rather than SDR and AE and inbound marketing teams, they've been leaning into their customer success functions. And we see the result of, or the reason why here in this chart. And so, as I said, vendors had to find some other way to grow. And they did. They did that by, drastically in some cases, increasing prices on their existing customers. They found they couldn't get new customers, so let's make more money from our existing ones. What this chart shows is the ratio of an average renewal to an average new purchase in terms of the price. And what we can see here is that the average renewal is 60% higher than the average new purchase. That's through a combination of perhaps upgrades, upsells, but also price increases. And so this is the result. So this has worked. This has helped SaaS vendors get through this difficult time. What's interesting for me, and we'll see more of a theme of this later in my presentation, this has stopped going up. That ratio has stopped changing. And so what got SaaS vendors through the SaaS winter into this SaaS spring won't get them into summer, right? Because vendors have started pushing back. So not only have renewals become more important, renewals have become longer term. What this chart shows is the propensity for a software buyer to opt for a contract that's 1 year or longer compared to a monthly contract. And we compare it since January 2021, when the markets were still very, very good. And what we can see is the average propensity for those longer term contracts peaked at 40% more likely than they were in January 2021. Now, what does this mean? So obviously, partly this was a response from buyers to say, okay, our prices are going up. What can we do? What negotiation levers do we have to negotiate a lower price? And certainly contract length was one thing they lent on. If you're a software vendor, if you're a founder in the audience right now, what this means is, if you're selling in a competitive market, your number one job has to be to find the renewal dates of your prospective customers with their existing vendors, because that's your window to sell, right? People are not taking buying decisions or having the opportunity to churn every month. So like the previous chart, where I'd said things had gotten a little better, well, we can see it here too. So we can see that from 40% more likely, this year it's fallen to 20% more likely to have an annual contract. We think this is a sign of a healing market, right? We're starting to return to the levels before the SaaS winter. Buyer behavior is starting to normalize, and for all of us that are selling software, this means that life is likely to get a little easier for us in the future. Having said that, SaaS budgets are still tight. This is what we call the Cledara SaaS Momentum Index. This asks a very simple question. We look at every customer we have and we ask, are they spending more on software this month than they did the previous month? And if they did, we give them a score of 200. If they spend a lot less, we give them a 0, or about the same they spend one, we give them a score of 100. We average all these out, and if the number coming out is more than 100, it means the average company is increasing their software spend. And that's the first thing to notice here. On average, companies always increase their software spend. So even in hard times, there's more growth in the market. We see that come through in Gartner data with regard to the size of the overall market. Two other things I want to call out on this, where there's been significant changes of behavior. The one is towards the end of 2022. And that's what you see where the chart starts going a little bit flat, right? What happened was fewer companies, or a smaller percentage of companies, were increasing their software spend. And we all felt this if we're selling software. This is where it started to feel a little harder. The other thing we see now that didn't happen before is that software buyers are professionalizing, right? We've heard a lot from our VCs and boards about efficiency, and companies are really embodying this. They're using tools like Cledara at the end of every quarter to clean up their software expense. And you can see the dips at the end of each quarter where people are taking stock of their software. So enough of the bad news, now the good news. I'm happy to declare that the software inflation is over, right? So what this measures is the average paid for a tool this year versus last year across new and existing customers of those tools. And we can see that as companies were increasing prices, as inflation was high in the real economy, inflation was high in software as well. This year, we've seen the complete opposite. What companies are paying at renewals now is flat to negative compared to where it was last year. That's going to be through a combination of rationalizing seats, rationalizing plans, but also obviously vendors not increasing prices. If you're a SaaS vendor, you've been investing in your customer success teams for the last 2 years to get that growth when new logos were hard. What this says is now that you've got to start thinking about growing your pipeline, hire SDRs, hire AEs, find new ways to grow, because this year will not look like last year. This year, you'll have to find new logos to grow. You won't be able to just increase prices. And if you're a software buyer, you've professionalized, you've smartened up, you've started pushing back against price increases. And if you haven't, what this means is that all your competitors are, and you should too. The other piece of good news is that despite the markets being tight, companies have been trying new software. So what this shows is the ratio of new software to existing software in companies over the past 12 months. And so for every 5 tools that companies use, 1 is going to be new. The interesting thing for me about this is even in tough times, this didn't change. So even though there hasn't been a lot of budget that companies have been able to allocate to these new tools, they've been definitely still trying them, trying to make themselves better. This combined with the earlier slide where I showed there's not much budget, this gives us hope, right? If we're selling software right now, this says there's always a way in. Companies are trying new things. Of course, a lot of those new things, and this is not a surprise to anyone that's wandered around the stands today, a lot of the new software that people are trying is AI-powered software. This chart looks at the percentage of all new software tried by companies that's an AI thing, right? An AI-first, AI-centric, probably 3-week-old startup that's built something cool. And what's interesting about this is 1 out of 5 new tools that companies are trying is AI. And so if you're a vendor, what this means is that you're now fighting with a new competitor, if not directly, certainly for your buyer's attention, right? AI is taking an ever-increasing part of our buyers' new software stacks. If you're a buyer of software and you're not yet using AI in your company, what this chart shows you is what your competitors are doing, right? So please do consider trying it because they certainly are, and you may be left behind. So, as someone once said, the future's already here, but it's just not evenly distributed yet. What this shows is the AI adoption by teams within businesses as a percentage of their overall budget. So the first thing that you should note is that the biggest adopter of AI within businesses, marketing, is still only allocating 6% of their software budget to AI, right? So companies are trying things, yes, but they're not yet allocating a whole lot of budget. The other thing to note is other teams across the business, take sales for example, marketing's neighbor, they're barely adopting AI at all. And so if you're a company or a founder of an AI company, think about how this affects you. And if your marketing team and you're a founder is not yet using AI, again, that seems like a good place to start. By the way, if you're interested in more research about how businesses are adopting AI, we've just released the data behind the hype, a recent study into how businesses are using AI, and it's a great way for you to benchmark yourself. And so I want to leave this with this slide. So what we did was we asked companies, are you going to increase or decrease your AI spend next year? And what's interesting about this, 90% of companies said they were going to maintain, increase, or significantly increase their software spend in 2025. This bodes well for the health of the global software markets because it means more money coming in. For me, the most interesting part of the study was that 1 in 20 companies said the way they were going to fund that increase in AI spend was actually reallocating budget from payroll to AI. So as a human, maybe that's a little concerning, but for a seller of software, that's great because that means there's more money coming into software budgets for people to purchase things. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me. I look forward to be back on this stage next year to see if I was right. But what's clear to me is that whilst the market is healing, we are out of the spring, we're perhaps approaching the SaaS summer, but some of these new market behaviors are really sticking, and they may be with us forever. If you'd like to download this presentation, you can grab that QR code there. It'll also take you to all the other research that we share. Thank you very much.